All right, everybody. I had discussed with Tara and that about whether the board has made any cuts based on their discussions they had the other night, and as I thought, they have not. So they are waiting, I think, to see what the RTM does. So tonight, we're going to talk about the budget and what kind of report we would like to give to the RTM, and whether or not we support the budget or not. So I think that we'll have a discussion first. And if we have another meeting scheduled, and so if we don't get far enough tonight, we can always vote at another time. But I don't think we're going to spend that much time here tonight, but let's see what everybody thinks. Do you want to go around and just everybody share their opinion? Or do you have questions that you think did not get answered in all of the times that we met or discussed with the Board of Ed? Okay, who wants to go first?
Well, I can.
Okay, good. That's good. Okay.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can hear you.
I think it looks like a reasonable placeholder for now until we see what's happening. I think we need to let our superintendent try to be creative and work on bringing us back into the fold, but we also need some discipline on being careful. So I think it's a good placeholder for where we are now, and I think we need to continue to work on trying to do the saving that's been suggested. We can.
You think that they should work on trying to do more savings? Is that what you said?
I'm sorry.
She said, or do you think that they should work towards finding more savings?
Which is, well, only if it's reasonable. Yes, if it's reasonable. And I
Okay.
think that areas it might be reasonable. But if they're not reasonable, then we shouldn't even think about it. But we should try. I think that's the message, is to try.
Okay. Who wants to be next? Okay, Ann.
I am 100% with what Peter said at our last meeting. I will vote to approve the budget only because if we reject the budget, we go back to the prior year's budget, which isn't sufficient. And when we give a message to the RTM, I want that very clearly stated that I'm not saying we, but at least myself and I think a couple of other members of the committee do not feel that the Board of Finance process was fair and transparent and has put the Board of Ed and this administration in a position where they're, trying to figure out what to cut without hurting their ability to function and not hurt the educational experience of the students in the school. So whereas I will vote to approve the budget, I'm doing it grudgingly.
Because you would, let me just see if I understand this, you would otherwise vote against it to prove a point. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And I'll go next. I kind of agree with Anne and Peter. I believe the process, which should have been collaborative between the Board of Finance and the Board of Education, wasn't really collaborative. It was more imposed from the Board of Finance, and then the Board of Education had to go back and work with the directive, or it's not even a directive, what the Board of Finance told them that they have to arrive at a number. So I will vote to approve as well the budget begrudgingly, because I wish I could reject it so the Board of Finance cuts wouldn't go through. But since we cannot do that, I would just approve what we have.
Okay, so this is a bad time to vote no, just to prove a point. Right, would you, Teresa, what do you say?
Yeah, so I agree with what Anne, Caroline, and Peter have said, and I'd like to add, like, I went in and did a lot more work, and well, the other reason I don't approve of this cut is I get these are difficult times, but on an average, for the average Darien household, this is a $200 savings based on the numbers that the Board of Finance uses to come up with our mill rate or tax base, whatever. They use they use certain criteria. So this averages out to a $200 savings on our tax bill this year for the average Darien household. And it's a lot of hurt for $200, and a lot of hurt that I don't think is very forward looking in the long term. When you make a cut now, what is the effect, not for this coming school year, but the school years after that when we have to play catch up? So for that reason, I'm upset about the cut. And I would like for us to discuss that. I mean, I personally, I don't know if anybody else agrees, I really wish the Board of Finance had agreed to the non-lapsing account. And since they rejected that, I wish the Board of Ed would consider pre-buying certain items now. We've already been taxed for these. We've already been taxed for things in the education budget, and I'd hate to see things cut because we're giving $800,000 back only to have to basically beg for it again on July 1st. So that's my opinion.
Thank you.
I second what Teresa said, and what kind of it's in my opinion upsetting is that having to give this money that we've already been taxed for back to the Board of Finance means that then the Board of Ed needs to come back and request this money when the Board of Finance doesn't really have line item, veto or capabilities to decide what this money should be invested in. So I hope and pray that the Board of Education, when they meet shortly in the next few days, that they do approve using those funds that should theoretically be going back to the general fund for things that were taxed, and we were already taxed, the residents of Darien, and paid for this year.
I don't know. I don't know if they have a meeting scheduled in the next few days. I mean, I think we'll probably have our meeting before they have another meeting based on the schedule I see. Yes,
Their meeting is Tuesday, June 9th.
Yeah, and ours is June 8th, so that's okay. All right, Liza, did you want to join in?
Thanks, Clara. Yeah, sorry, I've just been thinking about this real hard. I agree. I think we need to approve the budget as it is now. I have a lot of hesitations about the changes that were made. I would like to also champion the pre-purchasing of all the iPads, the Chromebooks, the routers, the maintenance equipment, the science equipment, the music equipment. I would get in as much as we can. I think it is, these funds have already been earmarked for purposes for Darien Public Schools, and the taxpayers are going to get a discount if we do the pre-purchase. So I think it's in the best interests of the taxpayers of the school, and especially given the context of this budget cycle, I think it's absolutely recommended. I felt very frustrated the last Board of Ed meeting that I listened to when we were talking about items to be cut. And, I do not, to be clear, I do not support cutting anything that involves academics, curriculum. I heard a suggestion that, we should cut purchasing books from the Darien High School library. And, because it might, we should do that instead of, freshman sports. I don't think Project Lead the Way should be considered a cut. I don't think that the high school ideas should be considered a cut. I think it should only be administrative operating procedures or athletics or extracurriculars that are put on the chopping block going forward. And I also think one of the reasons why I'd like to see the budget, go through is that I feel a little concerned that I haven't heard an agenda item yet about how do we get kids back in school? How do we get kids and staff safely back to school? How do we start assessing kids? And, how do we get that process rolling? I feel like we have got to turn our attention as a community and as a school district to safely getting students and staff back in school this fall. So That's how I feel about it.
Do you think that the report should include any comments about all the uncertainties that there are? For example, will there be specifications about fewer kids in a classroom, changes in class size policy, perhaps a need to have kids come only on certain days? All of these things will cost money. So I think that points out that, there's a lot of uncertainty that's going to be costly ahead. Do you think there should the report that says anything about that.
Yes,
I
I do.
definitely do.
You do?
I applaud your mentioning that it hasn't even been talked about, and it's a huge, huge expense and a lot
It's
of
the
time involved.
I
Okay.
feel like it's the elephant in the room. And even when they're talking about cuts, they're not saying, certain sports are not going to be tenable based on COVID-related problems. If you look at the CDC website and they talk about youth sports and how to go forward, no travel should be taking place right now or in the near future. It's considered a high-risk activity. Those are costs that can be, these are synergies that we could be looking at with the budget. But we can't even get to, safely getting back to school and safely accommodating, extracurriculars because we have to focus on this new cut. So anyway, I apologize. I do feel frustrated.
Like to
I'm sorry.
piggyback on what Liza was just saying, the other thing that I've heard them kind of talk about increased enrollment. Like, for example, I get an email every week from like all the real estate agents in town. In the past week, I have never seen so many pending transactions, closed transactions. I even see it in my own area. Our enrollment is going to go up from people, I think, moving, not only people moving here, but I wonder if there are going to be private school people who might think twice about paying $30,000, $40,000 a year for online learning, and will it make more sense for them to come back into the public schools? So not only do we not have a plan because of CDC guidelines, and I feel like people aren't thinking ahead, like what is our enrollment going to look like, and how is that going to affect the classroom and the costs associated with it?
And as Clara said, they may need shifts, they may need PPE. The board has touched on this, just touched on the conversation of this, but honestly, they just don't know. And, if you have shifts, you have bus costs that go with shifts. It's a really unknown situation. And the way they're talking about cutting this budget, they're cutting all the flexibility out of it. So it seems to me that they're creating an environment that the Board of Ed has to go begging to the Board of Finance for everything that they want, which does not strike me as a tenable situation.
I did email Tara today actually because we have had that question in our January packet about what's the total enrollment in Darien in both public and private schools, and we still don't know. And I think it would be worth knowing because some of those students are going to probably come back from private schools or from boarding schools where parents might not want their children, staying overnight in other places. So I don't know. We got the Malone and McBroom study. And I did see from that this year, I believe, there were a lot of students who did not make the transition from 8th to 9th grade. So even if there's a lot of possibility for kids to come back here and have big swings in the enrollment. So that's something I think is worth mentioning. Peter, you haven't said anything. Would you like to comment or?
Sure, yeah, thanks. I'll make a couple comments regarding the budget 21, and then there's two other topics I want to cover related to it, which is one, I sent you a copy of a letter I sent to John Zagrodzky, so I wanted to just brief you guys on what is new on all these things. And the third thing, the most important, I think, is I want to go through the systemic issues that sort of this current year highlighted for me, and I think that gives us a lot of opportunity to make the system better as far as the approval system and the whole order of things that are happening. So first thing regarding the budget, I would go yes for efficiencies, but no anything that impacts student learning, including the clubs, intramurals, all of this that Lisa mentioned as well, right? Safety patrol, stock market, all these things are part of the education, and I don't think we should agree to it. And I'll repeat something that I've written before. I might have mentioned it, but I think we in Darien need to show in exact these times that we manage our finances properly, so we don't need to cut our long-term plans and education and compromising our values at this particular point when a lot of people are looking and moving out of the city and thinking where they're going to live. And I also think that cutting this education budget will actually be counterproductive and could cut the real estate values here and the wealth in town. So that's number one. Number two. Number three, I don't know why we're not looking at the capital budget as well. I know John Zagrodzky in his email and Tara mentioned it, that so that schools can operate without it. But I do know particularly well in my district in Holmes that the HVACs were meaningful. They will impact student learning. It's hot in those classrooms. So I'm just we're discussing this million, but it's really additional, I think, million or 800,000 that was cut from the capital budget. Number 4, I think the board is very practical how they're approaching this, the Board of Education, how they try to find the solutions. They're all good people who care, but I think they're missing the priorities, at least the list of priorities that they could all share with us to sort of help us to decide these things or help them to decide these things. I know this repeated discussion about the wrestling mat, whether Super wants it in, doesn't, now it's coming back. I mean, if I'm Dr. Adley, I mean, how do I run a district when I'm coming back and forth on one particular issue? Also, I heard something that I think Lisa mentioned as well, these freshman sports. There was a comment at the Board of Education meeting last time suggesting that cutting it would be more palatable if other in our DRG behave the same. Well, I think it's wrong, that attitude. I think maybe I misunderstood it. I hope I did, but I don't care what New Canaan is doing. I think we live here and we deserve better. Number 5. And this is something I appreciate, and I've heard from the Board of Education members saying, hey, you want to spend some time and going through this list that we put together and discussed, and we're interested in your input. And I think I would advise everybody in this committee to reach to their friends on the Board of Education, because I think they mean well, and we all want to come to some solution. Regarding the pre-buys, I think this is just an unintended consequence of all this. And while I appreciate the pre-buy discussion and I hear arguments on both sides, I think the Board of Education has been tasked to promote education within fiscal limits and funds given by the town, and therefore pre-buys to me fit within this mandate. And buying routers for elementary school is not exactly the same as a conference in Vail or some other spending that would not match. So I would also suggest, and I'm shy that I'm saying it, but I would suggest to use the flexibility and spend as much as we can. I know Dr. Adley came up with 300,000 in it, in a typical fashion. Let's go midway, see how the community responds, which I think is very reasonable. But as we said, as you guys said, these funds have been appropriated already. Now, one more thing, I don't think the suggestion by John Zagrodsky that over the course of coming year, if it's apparent that savings are simply not materializing despite diligent effort, the Board of Finance will consider an appropriation request to cover the shortfall. I don't think it's practicable. I don't think that shows leadership and gives clarity to the administration how to run their district. Board of Finance should not be tasked at all with deciding whether this is enough or not, right? So I would suggest, and I would recommend that the budget is closed, agreed upon, and other than COVID, there is no reason to come back. Now that leads me to the last thing about this budget, which is what's our role really, right? And I think at this point, as this committee, I really don't know how this budget looks like. I mean, on this list that we've been given. By the way, CDSP gives a great summary of every meeting and provides great information, and I thank them for this. But I don't know. There's a bunch of things that I don't like, and I would prefer that we get more clarity before we're voting. I think we need to vote before the RTM meets. I as you realize that by voting no, it means that we would cut funds further. So I'll lean to vote yes if it if it comes to that. But I would like to know where is the administration, where is the Board of Education leading with this. So quite frankly, I don't know the process either of if we say no, and then they later go to Board of Finance asking for more. Does Board of Finance need to come back to us, to RTM, for the approval, or do they take it from some kind of fund? I would love to be educated more on that. So that's my comment.
If the Board of Ed has to go to the Board of Finance to ask for money, they would then have to come back to the RTM too. So they have to do the whole process. That's my understanding. And having experienced it a couple of times, it's a difficult process. So, nobody wants to go to the Board of Finance or the RTM saying essentially we ran out of money and we need help paying our bills, which is pretty much what they would have to do. So anyway, I did want to ask everybody, Peter had shared the letter that he got from John Zagrodzky with me, and I asked if we could share it with everybody. Did everybody get the 2 letters? Yes, okay. Okay, so we haven't heard from some people, so I feel like Karen.
Yeah.
I absolutely thank Peter for sending that letter. I found it was very informative, and I totally agree with what he's saying and what Anne was saying. And listening to people talking now, nobody knows what it's going to be like in September and how much money is going to be spent on having to satisfy all the safety requirements as they ease back into action. And to me, it seems crazy to hamper yourself and before you even start to have to be constrained by the money, which is bound to cost more money, just because you have fewer children in each room and as you say, the busing and all the rest of it. And I mean, one will say yes, but it has to be strongly worded that it's under duress. I agree.
What did you say? Strongly worded? Could you say that again?
What did I say at the end? I just said we would say yes, but under duress.
Okay, and you said something about being strongly worded. I just wanted to make sure
Well, yes. I mean, because I think I'm getting the feeling from what everybody has said that we'll do it, because to go back to square one is probably self-defeating, but it has to have some punch or something in the recommendation, even though we do vote to say that we'll pass the budget.
Okay.
And so.
All right, I think we haven't heard from Ed. Curtis, are you finished, Karen? And we can always come back.
Sorry, it's Ed. Yeah, no, I'll just a brief comment, kind of echoing what everybody else has said. Like, it's not optimal, but I don't think we really have a choice as to whether we're gonna approve it or not. I think the only thing I would say is that, like, I know a lot of people have put a lot of time into trying to manage to do the least amount of damage while reducing the cost. So I appreciate all that effort from the administration, the board of ed, the board of finance, and I don't really think we have an alternative.
We don't have an alternative but to vote yes. Is that what you mean?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. I mean, we have an alternative. Cut this, not that. Don't cut X and such. But I mean, those decisions have been made. So for our purpose, like, I don't really consider we have an alternative. And I think while we may have issues with some of the decisions that have been made, I think frankly probably everybody in this process has issues and would have done it differently if they were the dictator in charge. But because there is no dictator in charge, and this is the product of a big process. And again, like it or not, here we are.
Right. Okay. Let's see. I think we still haven't heard from Curtis. Is that right? Is he here? Is Curtis here? Okay. Did Joan
I do not
Davis?
believe he is.
You don't think? Oh, okay. How about Joan Davis? Did she ever come?
No, I'm afraid not.
We haven't heard from Lucy.
Hi.
Lucy's here.
Lucy.
Hi, I'm voting yes on the budget, but
Okay.
I want to add that since 2016, we've added almost $10 million to our budget. We already have a huge budget. And I think if we continue going up and up and up and up, we're going to find ourselves in trouble one day. But that being said, we haven't yet so far. I've been on the RTM a long time, and the budget goes up every year, and we've survived it. I don't like conversations about making silly cuts to arts and sports and to anything that has to do with the kids. I think we're heavy on admin, and if they're going to cut anything, it should be admin, but that's not up to me. Regarding COVID, we have no idea what will happen. It's a totally fluid situation, and lots of things hopefully will change by the time school rolls around. I also have faith in the Board of Ed and our admin to get the schools ready to open up at the end of August or September. And even though we haven't heard much about what they're doing to open those schools, I'm sure they're working on it. And things change every day. But I think, as everybody said, we don't really have a choice.
That's true. Okay. I think they are working on it. In fact, I did ask Tara if they had had any directives from the governor's office, and I believe they have not yet, but they are working on it locally. So that's true. Does anybody else want to make another comment or comment for the first time? Anne?
There's two things that I'd like to mention just for fullness of knowledge about things that have gone on. So when the Board of Finance came up with their formula for how things should be cut, which a lot of people have made noise about, that it wasn't exactly correct as to how they wanted to cut the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed budget. The Board of Selectmen came up with the cuts that they requested, but also when they sent along a series of cuts that the department heads had said that they could do, which would not affect the services in the town, which amounted to several $100,000. The Board of Finance rejected that, didn't take them, and insisted that the Board of Ed do the cuts that it put in its formula. That's one thing. The second thing, unrelated, is that over this past weekend, Republican members, not all of them, but most of the Republican members of the Board of Ed had a separate private meeting, two separate private meetings, working on the budget. I don't know what they discussed or if they're trying to come up with some plan, but why they're doing it in private and not as a Board of Ed, not as a subgroup of the Board of Ed, but as the whole Board of Ed, because it seems to me the Board of Ed should be operating in a transparent and collaborative way, not in separate groups. And that disturbed me a lot. And I know it doesn't affect our vote right now on the budget, but just so you guys have some of the flavor of what's going on.
Thank you. Is there anybody?
Can I quickly add to that? I heard about that meeting too, and my understanding is that one of those two meetings actually constituted a quorum. It was at least 5 members of the Board of Education. And just a question, as a former member of the Board of Education, is that common practice?
No. But if there's somebody, well, Anne and Teresa brought up a good point. I know that everybody wants to see a lot of flexibility in the budget, and that makes a lot of sense. But what I wanted to know about mentioning this, relating to transparency, and that is, as forward and the Board of Ed cuts or has to make changes in the way money is spent. For example, maybe there won't be a wrestling team, so do they really need that mat? I think it's important for them to let the community know what they're thinking and to provide for transparency, because it's important for the community to be able to come back and make comments about some of the things they're hearing, just like we're doing tonight. So I hope the Board of Ed has a process for that in a very uncertain time. So I was thinking of mentioning something about transparency and opportunity for community input as we go forward. Would that be all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And is there anyone from the board on the call now who might be able to shed some light on that?
Clara, I'm here. This is Jill. There was one meeting in a caucus, which is allowed. I'm happy to provide the legal documentation if you'd like it. We could talk about why we felt it was necessary, but there's a lot of concern about no one board member that I've talked to wants deep educational cuts, wants to impact the arts, wants to impact,
Right.
you know, a lot of the educational programs that are on the superintendent's list. I understand why they're there, but I haven't heard a single board member who's interested in taking educational programmatic cuts. So we did decide to meet in caucus in order to organize the conversation to focus more on the kinds of cuts that would not impact education. Things like looking at budget control and what type of information we had about enrollment, things like the Special Education Reserve Fund and how that could be used to offset the legal fees, so that we can hopefully meet the conditions of the cut in a way that impacts education least, and try to tamper down the significant concern that we certainly hear and can echo.
Okay. Is there a reason, I mean, you know, you don't have to answer this, but is there a reason why it was along a party line, or maybe like why didn't the budget committee do it, or, you know, a different kind of cross section?
I did actually ask if the budget committee could do it, and I was told that it's not in the charge of the finance committee. And so that wasn't a vehicle that was available to us. So we chose to use the mechanism of a caucus.
Okay. All right. Well,
can I just quickly add, just hearing that, Jill, just, I mean, for given what you guys have discussed as a taxpayer in town, as a member of the RTM, I would really have much rather you guys had that conversation in a Board of Education meeting, not in a private caucus. Just saying.
Well, it doesn't, I understand, and it doesn't replace Teresa, because a caucus can't make any sort of decision and isn't trying to. It was just a function of organizing some of the information so that we're prepared with questions and information. And I agree, it's very difficult, 9 of us, where you're called on one at a time, to have an organic conversation. So the hope is to translate all of that to a very transparent public conversation. And I hope going forward, everything can be held in that manner.
Was the caucus recorded? Will it be on Channel 79?
A caucus is by definition not a public meeting.
Oh, really? Okay, because I know when we have caucuses to get to add people to the RTM, that's called a caucus, and that is recorded. So I just wondered why. But anyway, okay. All right. Thank you, Jill.
If you'd like to see the legal, what we pulled up, I'd be happy to provide it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Are there minutes for the meeting, or not even that?
It is not a legal meeting, or it's not a public meeting.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone else who has a question about anything that we discussed this evening? Okay. All right. So I think what we need is a motion to approve. Let me get the information. Hold on a minute.
Hey, Claire, I don't know if it belongs before the vote or after, but I would love to still talk about, and this is probably the best forum to talk about the ideas.
What is it?
The systemic ideas that I have, and I wanted to hear you guys' feedback on that. So we can do that after the vote or before, whatever you think is right.
I guess what we could use is a motion to approve the budget, and I will count here, which is $102,496,378 is made in the general fund for the education operating budget. Would someone like to make a motion? All right, Anne, and a second? Okay, Carolina. All right, so the motion is on the table. Peter, you had an additional thing to discuss. Did it relate to the budget?
It relates to the process, yes, for sure, yes. And also to my conversation with John, which leads into it. So I don't know, we can do it in any other way. Just tell me if you want me to speak now or if you want me to speak after the vote.
All right, I think we will just, if you could briefly tell us what you wanted to say.
Yeah, so first I want to tell you what John and I talked about, and then as I said about the policy issue. So John spent 40 minutes on Monday with me, and it was admirable that he was willing to spend his time just with one resident, and he was open, and he's always open, which I respect to anybody who wants to talk to him. I just want to summarize sort of his position, and it's in my words, but which sort of leads to why we are where we are. He thinks he sees inefficiency, and by the way, whether he spoke to me as a Board of Finance member or chairman, the question is whether some of these should be in context of him as a private citizen rather. But regardless, you know, he sees inefficiency in the budget, and basically effectively saying the Board of Education ought to explore them, you know, closer than they have. You know, there's obviously a fine line between inefficiencies and it cuts impacts student outcomes. And to John's credit, is focused on the efficiencies, although the numbers that he's asking for seems like would touch the student activities. He's got particular concerns regarding shared services, and a bunch of directors that are on both sides of town and education, Board of Education, that he thinks could be done more efficiently. He was disappointed that Board of Education didn't come back after their February 11th board of, budget approval and didn't revisit the budget in light of the pandemic. He also doesn't want to use the reserve fund despite being overfunded by 7-8 million because of the range of outcomes that is high, because of the future spending.
He doesn't want to use funds.
I'm sorry?
Could you just repeat your last sentence? I didn't hear
I
it.
was just saying that he prefers, right? That's what we're trying to solve, is not to use the 7-8 million in the reserve fund that's there. That's 30-40% more than we actually should have in there, because of the uncertainty and wide range of outcomes and spending that is upon us for the following fiscal year.
But wait a minute, now, if the Board of Ed has to go back and ask for money, wouldn't it come from that reserve fund?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. That he wants to. That's right. So he doesn't want to spend. There's cost, right? That he doesn't want to increase taxes until then.
Okay.
And I guess finally, and this is the overriding thing that Lucy mentioned as well, the taxes have gone up quite a bit over the last 10 years, and we don't want to see people who have no longer kids in school system to be moving out of town. Now, the Board of Finance is really have one right in this town, right, which is setting the statutory tax rate, right? And if they don't raise it, and this is me now speaking, I'm sort of finished with the conversation summary, is if they don't raise it, the RTM really has no role, right? And if somebody can tell me if I'm wrong on it, but you could see a scenario where Board of Finance, these 7 smart people will keep this budget flat for the next 5 years, right? And I just wonder what is them to stop and whether there is a better way to do this. And that leads me to what I wanted to really talk about, which is I think we have this whole process, this budget process backwards, right? I think we, and I admit I may not understand it or have lived with it for a long time, but I think every year the super comes, puts together his budget, puts together his spending ideas, his ideas about the education of the kids, without really knowing how much he can spend. Right? It's actually amazing that this has worked so well by consensus historically. But it's really, if you think about it, as a family who would decide where they're going on vacation without actually deciding their budget first. It's really the other way around. And I think it's upon us to set up a system that's going to be more predictable, will lead to a repeatable process and easier decision making on all levels: administration, Board of Education, Board of Finance, and without basically these inefficiencies that we see here, right? So what I wanted to suggest, and I know people will say, well, this is a whole discussion about rules and all that, but why doesn't the Board of Finance suggest a tax rate first before even the Board of Education actually starts working on the budget? And it doesn't have to be one tax rate. It could be a range. It could be set for 1 year. It could be set for, multiple years, right, to give people predictability about their spending. Now, obviously, taxes need to somehow relate to wealth in town, which is related to income in town. I guess the best proxy we have is the grand list to wealth in this town. So why not to set up, a rule, right, that could be overridden by supermajority or somehow by RTM. Question is, should this be, by the way, agreed upon by RTM or Board of Finance, right? And I'm leaning to RTM if we go this way, but wouldn't it make sense to first set this, to tell people how much they can spend before they spend hours and days of thinking about this? So that's number one, right? And obviously there could be flexibility. The tension between these different bodies is healthy, but I also think that that's not the rule. It's not the role of Board of Finance to really go line by line and discuss the Board of Education budget, right? They should look at how much wealth is here, what's the spending power of this town, and keep it somehow in some kind of range going forward, right? So that's number one. That's maybe on Board of Finance. Board of Education, and I know Jill and also John Cini mentioned it recently in the recent meeting, right? The rules are they have to hire the best superintendent, right? But they also have to have tools and metrics how to evaluate him under any scenario. So we can say after each year whether he has done a good job or not, whether even if the budget was big or small, right? That's number one. Number two, though, they have to set educational priorities. They have to be, again, measurable student outcomes. We have to have a framework. There should be a list that says, listen, these are our rules. These are the decision rules. So when then we come to a situation where there's not enough money, there's clear sort of solutions here. Because right now, as I understand, there is a list from Board of Finance and all of these members, and now even a party or not party is that they'll now go and prioritize themselves instead of as a group saying, okay, well, we want the best SAT. And as I talked about last time, but I think that's important to set these education priorities. And the third thing is making sure and guarantee, and that's a Board of Education, my opinion, role, is guarantee the system efficiency. And I don't know if there's such a subcommittee exists or not, but John's effort in pointing and saying no to higher budget is to point out these inefficiencies. And quite frankly, this list that came up with it has a bunch of inefficiencies in it, right? And I think if there would be a subcommittee that focus on this efficiency, that really digs into every line item throughout the school year, and and follows the administration, then we could clearly say, well, this is the best we can do, right? There was a lot of small savings, and I think we need to somehow institutionalize the process within it, right? And I think, and then the role of the superintendent is to help together to set this vision of the system, but also then be able to execute and be given autonomy to actually execute this, right? So going back, as I said, I'm repeating it now, but going back to Board of Finance is just not very practical. So anyway, I just wanted to throw it out there. It's not going to happen this cycle, but I think it's up for us to make the system better. And I think I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be more efficient. Why do we always go the other way? I'm confused by it. Maybe somebody can explain it to me.
I don't think I can explain it to you now, but there's always room for new ideas. I don't think we're going to solve that this evening or even this month, but I think you pointed out some of those things to John Zagradsky, and I think it's worth additional conversation, but probably not tonight. Are we ready to vote? We have a motion on the table. Ann moved, Carolina seconded.
Can I say one more thing? Sorry about this vote. Why is it, I know we're saying there's no other reason, right? Why would we postpone this vote? We said we're going to meet again. We could meet again before, right? And what if we learn something throughout the next 6 days before our vote for the RTM, or 5 days, that is something that's really going to bother people? Some decision that will be made in good spirit, but it's going to be, third grade strength, or something that we will feel like it's inappropriate. Now, that is right. Even under that condition, it behooves us to vote yes. So why wait? I get that, but to me, more information is better. I guess that's the only.
I agree. And Clara, we haven't heard from you on what your opinion is.
Well, you mean relating to the budget itself?
Yes.
My opinion is that I think that it would be foolish to vote against it just to prove a point. I would definitely vote for it. I think there's a lot of need for flexibility, and I think that some of that flexibility has been taken away. I am concerned about all the uncertainties of the COVID-19 situation. I'm afraid the expenses could be enormous, but I also hope that the Board of Ed looks at expenses that may be in the budget, that they may not, places where they may not spend the money. They're field trips, things that probably aren't going to happen next year. That's going to free up money for spending on other things. There may also be a lot of need for some sort of remedial work with students. That's costly. There's a lot of special ed issues. Not everybody thrives on e-learning. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. And that's what I would talk about, as well as all the things that you all have brought up, or a lot of the things that you've brought up. So are there, I guess right now we have a motion on the table to vote tonight. And if we feel uncomfortable about that, we do have a meeting on the agenda for June 8th, which is the same night as the RTM meeting. If you want, we could postpone and get together, this way that night. I don't know how much more information will come forward between now and then. I don't think the Board of Ed has a meeting scheduled, and somebody could confirm that, maybe Jill or Dennis.
Can I just, sorry,
Yeah.
Claire, if we were postponing, what we're voting on the budget, right? So I'm not sure, I don't know what are we basically saying that in 5 days we might have information that would cause us to not vote to approve the budget, and that's why we'd be waiting? Or we'd be approving this budget, and if in 5 days the budget changed, wouldn't we have to be approving it again? I guess I'm not quite understanding what would be the circumstances that would, if the budget changed, we'd have to revote.
Yeah,
We?
I agree with Ed. The number is the number. We don't have line item control over the operating side. So whatever the Board of Ed decides to do, which they have until June 30th to do, we really don't have a say in that. We just have a say in that number, and that number is not changing.
Right.
So let's play through it, right? If we say no, right? Board of Ed decides that they're gonna cut something that's dear to all of us.
Peter, but the question isn't if we're saying no, right? Wasn't your proposal to not vote at all and to just wait on making the vote? I agree. If we were to vote no, that's one thing, but it sounded like everybody on this call was going to vote yes. So again, yeah, if we all changed our minds and voted no, then it's a different outcome. But I was just focused on if we vote yes versus not voting. Like, I'm just not sure what would be the reason for that. Like, again, it doesn't really matter what information we learn. As Teresa said, the number's a number, and the board's going to spend the money how they're going to spend the money, and I'm sure they're going to do it in a way that they think is best. Like, I really don't. I don't think it's worth trying to. Yeah.
I think the way I'm thinking about this committee, right? We're evaluating not only the absolute number, but we're also evaluating what is it spent on, right? That comes hand to hand as a role of this committee, at least to me, right? And if I learn over the next 5 days,
but
maybe learn nothing.
But it's not. But it's not, Peter, right? Like,
Yeah.
we may have, we're voting on a number. If you want to decide how it's spent, run for the Board of Ed. Like, that's that's the fundament. I mean, it just seems like this comes up repeatedly in our meetings. We are not the Board of Ed. Like, we can absolutely offer our opinions, just like parents and all the other stuff. But I think we shouldn't be trying to redo the budget as another Board of Education.
And the same way that we don't want the Board of Finance to say how to fix the budget, and we don't either. We can't. So it's either if you work on the Board of Ed, maybe you have a say, but that's about it.
That is right.
Well, everyone is open to have conversation about it, Peter, and I think that you make some really valid points. And Ed is right. We've been having these same conversations for years, and I don't think the process is ever going to change. I don't. Sorry.
So let's go through this, right? It's they say 100 million we spend, right? And we say, okay, we think that's the right number. Well, however I spend it, that's fine. I mean, is it really? Then we're saying what to the RTM? We're advising them that we think that the funds that they're allocating, right, tax funds that are allocating to the Board of Education are spent wisely. At least that's the way I understand it. I may be wrong, and I agree with you that you see it a little differently, but to me, how it's spent is important. I know I don't have a line item veto, but how it's spent is important. So if between now and then, learn.
But I think by definition, if we are dealing with a budget that people are being forced to cut, like everybody is cutting these numbers, nobody wants to cut these programs. So again, if we are 15 people, let's assume we have 15 different opinions as to what the cut should be. Let's assume the Board of Ed has different opinions as to what the cut should be. We've all made our comments. You know, again, I'm sorry. There's a motion on the table. Vote to approve the budget. I think we should either vote yes or no on, or abstain on that budget, and that's it. If there is a majority that wants to vote to vote against the budget approval, that's fine. But I'm still going to make the motion to have the vote. If people want to not, if people want to vote no, vote no.
Absolutely.
I agree with you,
That's
Ed.
right. That's right.
And-
That's absolutely. That's fine. I guess the way I understand the role that we have is a little different. That's why we differ, right?
Well,
But
if people don't know, they can tell and discuss with the group and Clara, and she can write it and say to the RTM why you voted no, or why a group voted no, and they can pass that on to the members of the RTM in Clara's speech, and the RTM can take that information, and some will maybe agree with you, some won't, but there's that option.
Clara,
Okay.
Barbara just asked, is it time to call the question?
Well, we'd have to vote on that. Okay, I just wanted to respond to Peter, and I think he makes a good point, that it is our job to determine whether the money is being spent wisely. As to the specifics of it, it's not our job. So I don't know what other information will come forward in the next few days. You know, there might be something that makes for a change, but I don't know. I don't think so. So I guess let's find out. If one person wants to call the question, should we have somebody move to wait until Monday to have the vote, to withdraw the motions that we have on the table? Does somebody want to do that?
I assume we all have to vote at the same time. Is it correct?
Pardon me?
We all have to vote at the same time? I guess that's what I'm asking. Because what I'm
We don't have
saying,
to vote at the.
correct. I guess the answer is obviously yes, right? But I assume, there's no way, if people want to vote now, they vote now. If I abstain now and then learn, that I'm, same comfortable, same comfort on Monday, can I tell you my vote before you present it, or that's not proper?
I don't think that's proper. But
Clara, this is Dennis.
if we want, who?
This is Dennis. Sorry, you asked the question. So we have no scheduled meeting until Tuesday, as you said, after our meeting.
Right.
But if I interject, as far as Peter's point, I mean, I sat on the RTM many years. I understand his point. I think, traditionally we come with the Board of Ed comes with a budget that you get to vote on as to what it is prepared. This is a different year, but honestly, we can't vote on a budget until after the RTM votes, because theoretically you can then go and make further cuts to that budget. So for us to prepare something for Monday night and then only to have it cut again would be a lot of wasted time for us. So we need to wait personally for the final number from you. And as far as if you want to vote on Monday, today, you can always change your vote on the RTM floor. You don't have to abide by what you vote tonight versus Monday. If you get different information, you can change your vote.
Yeah, but you agree that normal process would be that we know the complete budget before we opine on it as an RTM. We know not only the number, but we also know what Ed says. We know the number, that should be enough. But we also know all the line items, correct? In a normal year.
But I don't.
In a normal year, yes, we know the line items. Yes, absolutely, agreed. But this is not a normal year for sure.
Right. And this is all COVID. I understand the COVID decision is different, but yeah. So okay, I spoke my piece. I understand, and quite frankly, what I understand is I don't want to make this more difficult than it is, because voting no hurts the kids in this town, right? So that I get, but
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, for now, Peter, you kind of put it almost. Do you want to make a motion to postpone the vote until Monday for everybody?
I'll do whatever people prefer to do. I don't want to do this form over substance, Clara. If people want to vote now, be done with it. That's fine.
Here's what could happen.
I would personally wait, but I get that it's very unlikely to learn something. I already said my piece.
Okay, here's what you could do. You could make a motion to postpone the vote until Monday. Then someone would have to second it. If there is no second, then we won't do it. So if you want to do it that way, that's the process for doing it that way. Would you like to put a motion on the table?
So that's my suggestion. Yes, let's vote on Monday before we go into the meeting.
Okay, so Peter moved that we postpone the vote until Monday. Is there a second? I don't hear a second. Does anybody hear a second? Okay, there was no second, so the motion failed. So that's what happened, okay? Then I think we're back to the original motion was made by Ann and seconded by Carolina. That is, are we in favor of an appropriation of $102,496,378 made in the general fund for the education operation? Okay, I think we'll probably have to do a roll call because I can see everybody. So let's start. Curtis? Okay. How about Karen?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Barbara Thorne?
You're up.
Yes,
She votes yes.
yes, I do. You're
Okay. Ed? Is that here? How about,
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. I had a bad connection. Yeah. Ed, it's Ed. I vote yes.
okay, Carolina?
Under
Carolina?
duress, I vote yes.
Peter?
I'll abstain right now.
You're gonna abstain?
Yes.
Okay. Joan Davis? Lucy?
I'm a yes.
Lucy?
Did you hear me? I'm a yes.
Okay. Is that right, Ann? Are you a yes?
Oh, me?
Teresa?
Yeah,
Ann,
I'm
are
a
you a
yes.
yes?
Sorry, it's Ann. I vote yes, but under duress.
Same with me. I
Okay.
vote yes because while I'm not in favor of the cut, I have to vote yes.
Well, you're not in favor of,
I'm not in favor of the Board of Finance's cut, but I'm voting yes for the budget because voting no would be worse.
how about Janet?
Yes.
And Liza?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, then it passes. Okay, so we did have one abstention. We had 3 people who said they were voting under duress. We had two people absent. Is there anybody that didn't get called on? Okay. Are there any questions?
Can I just make one quick comment? I do think it might be nice to add in our comments to the full RTM that, we were disappointed about the lack of transparency and conversation between the Board of Finance and the Board of Ed prior to the cut that was made.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think it should be clear on the record that this was not a collaborative effort and not
Okay,
transparent.
good. All right. Are there any
Thanks.
other comments or questions? All right. I just wanted to, before we leave for the night, we have to keep up to date with our minutes. And I know it's been a crazy time, but I just wanted to ask that we keep up with that because people may be looking. And tonight we voted, so we would have to make sure the minutes are up for the next. That's okay. I think that it's time to call for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. And Carolina. Okay, and it's about 7. Thanks to all. We'll send this. I will send it to you first. You can. Okay.
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me. I'm not muted. Thank you for coming. I'll send the copy of the report. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well,
Bye.
The meeting is ended, Clara.
Yes, the meeting is ended. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cecil.